The universe was about to learn why humans don't read warranty labels. Jake Morrison's salvage ship Necessity was doing 3 things it wasn't designed to do: existing in 17 dimensions, arguing with itself in quantum languages, and preparing to either save humanity or spectacularly prove the Galactic Council right about humans being too stupid to live. "Well, sweetheart," Jake said to his ship as reality hiccuped around them, "we've made it this far by being magnificently stupid. Why stop now?" The cockpit strobed red like a cosmic emergency room, each flash revealing Jake's coffee-stained engineering manuals floating in zero gravity. His sister Emma had labeled them impossible repairs in her careful handwriting. She'd always been the organized one. Jake was the one who looked at broken things and saw potential. The Scrapyard Nebula sprawled before him like God's own junkyard. 1,000,000 civilizations worth of, it seemed like a good idea at the time, floated in quantum soup that could erase you from existence or give you superpowers. Depending on whether the universe was feeling generous that day, Jake Morrison was 3 things: a mediocre salvage operator, an excellent drunk, and the only human in the galaxy who could make alien technology work by insulting it in exactly the right way. The universe had rules. Jake had duct tape. It was going to be a fair fight. "All right, beautiful," Jake muttered to his dying ship, elbow deep in sparking electronics that were currently trying to electrocute him in languages he couldn't pronounce. "Let's see what happens when a Detroit mechanic meets alien engineering and all the safety protocols have a nervous breakdown." The Zephyrian nav computer felt wrong in Jake's hands. Too smooth, too warm, like touching liquid mercury that had opinions about being touched. When he jammed it into the human power coupling, reality made a sound like a cosmic guitar string snapping. And Jake's teeth ached in frequencies that didn't exist in normal space. The screaming alarms went quiet. Jake's instruments flickered, then stabilized in patterns that weren't in any manual. The ship's new sensors showed him impossible things: patterns in the debris, signals in the static, conversations in the cosmic background radiation. But the most impossible thing was that they were showing him home. Somewhere in this cosmic graveyard was the secret to getting home. Home to Detroit, where his sister Emma was teaching kids to build hope out of scrap metal and duct tape. Home to a species that the galaxy had decided was too dangerous to let play with the grown-ups' toys. Jake had always been better at proving people wrong than proving them right. The message from Earth was 3 days old: Detroit quarantine holding. Emma's kids still asking when Uncle Jake is coming home. Hurry. Jake looked at his impossible readings, at the alien voices whispering through dead technology, at the quantum storms that could kill him in 17 different ways simultaneously. "Well, kids," he said to the empty cockpit, "Uncle Jake's about to get creative. 6 months ago, Jake Morrison had been respectable. 6 months ago, humanity had been welcome among the stars. 6 months ago, no one had asked what happened when you gave a species raised on jury-rigged cars access to quantum engineering. They were about to find out. Jake had been chief engineer on the mining station New Harmony, humanity's shining proof that they belonged among the galactic community. Clean corridors, regulation, compliant everything, safety protocols that would make a Voron bureaucrat weep with joy. Then the Voron Empire's prize dreadnought, the Eternal Logic, had limped into their sector with a quantum cascade failure that had stumped their greatest minds for 3 centuries. The problem, their lead engineer had explained with mathematical precision, exists in a state of quantum superposition. Any attempt to observe it changes its nature. Any attempt to repair it destroys the observer. It is, by definition, unfixable. Jake had taken one look at the schematics and suggested they try turning it off and on again, but with more duct tape and a really good attitude. The Voron engineer had stared at him with the expression of someone watching physics commit suicide. That is not a solution. That is barely even a sentence. Yeah, but has anyone actually tried it? 23 minutes later, the Eternal Logic was the most powerful ship in the Voron fleet, running on technology that made their computers cry and their physicists drink heavily. Council Speaker Veline Ra's emergency address had been broadcast across the galaxy. The human species displays a fundamental disregard for established principles. Their technology functions through methods that violate causality, mock thermodynamics, and appear to be powered by pure stubbornness. This chaos represents a clear and present danger to the ordered structure of galactic civilization. The vote had been unanimous. Humanity was to be quarantined in the Scrapyard Nebula until they learned to engineer responsibly. Every human settlement, every ship, every outpost, all of it exiled to the galaxy's garbage dump. For your own good, they'd said, and everyone else's. Jake had volunteered to stay behind in the nebula, salvaging what he could to keep the human colonies supplied. Most days, he wondered if the council had been right. Maybe humans really were too reckless, too chaotic, too willing to break things that worked fine. Today, staring at the impossible patterns flowing through his makeshift sensors, Jake realized the council had been wrong about everything. The universe had an opinion about humans. It was wrong. The patterns weren't just instructions, they were love letters. Love letters from dead civilizations to the species that would understand them. Jake's hands moved without conscious thought, fingers reading the story of broken metal like Braille. Here, stress fractures from a captain who pushed too hard. There, scorch marks from weapons that fired concepts instead of energy. And underneath it all, the quantum signature of a civilization that had died trying to build something beautiful. The first voice that spoke to him came through his rewired communications array. Not as sound, but as pure understanding flooding his mind. It felt ancient, sad, and desperately hopeful. Finally, it whispered, "Someone who builds like we built." Jake's coffee cup began to vibrate in harmonics that spelled out mathematical equations. The one Emma had given him with "World's okayest engineer" printed on the side. "Okay," he said slowly, "that's new. Who are you?" "We were the architects of impossibility, the makers of dreams, the ones who refused to accept that something couldn't be done just because it had never been done before." Through his scanner, Jake saw them. Quantum shadows moving through the wreckage, consciousness preserved in technology that had conquered death by refusing to acknowledge it existed. The builders, as they called themselves collectively, had been dozens of different species across millions of years. They all shared one trait. They built things that shouldn't work. And when those things worked anyway, they built bigger things. "We died for it," the voice continued, and Jake could taste copper pennies and forgotten dreams. "Each of us, in our time, pushed too far, too fast. The universe punished us for our audacity. But we preserved ourselves in our final works, waiting for a species that could succeed where we failed. What makes you think humans are any different?" Jake asked, though his engineer's mind was already cataloging the impossible technologies floating around him. "Because you don't die for your dreams, you live for them. You take the broken pieces and make them into something better than the original. You are what we always tried to become." Jake understood. The builders hadn't died, they'd graduated. Become something beyond biological life, beyond the petty limitations of physics and reason. "What do you need me to do?" The answer came not in words, but in blueprints flooding his mind. Schematics for technologies that made his repairs look like kindergarten finger painting, ships that existed in parallel universes simultaneously, weapons that defeated enemies by making them forget why they were fighting, cities that folded space like origami and unfolded time like a roadmap. And something else, something vast and terrible approaching from the spaces between realities. "They come," the builders whispered. "The devourers of order, the reality eaters. They sense the chaos we've unleashed, and they hunger for it. They are the universe's immune system, and they have decided that chaos is a disease." Jake Morrison, professional breaker of things that weren't supposed to break. Today's assignment: fix the universe's immune system by convincing it that chaos was a vitamin. "Well," Jake said, cracking his knuckles, "Mom always said I'd either fix the world or break it trying." Turns out she was thinking too small. Jake spent the next 3 weeks learning to speak in quantum harmonics and impossible mathematics. His ship, Necessity, evolved daily, each new modification making it more alien and more dysfunctional. He could phase through solid matter by politely asking it to move, travel faster than light by convincing space he was already where he wanted to be, and generate power by making his engines argue with each other about who was more efficient. It was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever built, and it ran on controlled stubbornness. But the more he built, the more he understood the danger approaching. The reality eaters weren't just another hostile alien species, they were something worse. Cosmic antibodies that existed in the cracks between dimensions, feeding on the ordered structure of normal spacetime. Every impossible thing Jake created sent out ripples through dimensional space, calling to them like a dinner bell. The first sign of their approach came through the quantum communication network the builders had shown him how to access. Distress signals from the edge of the galaxy, where scout ships reported stars simply stopping, not exploding, not collapsing, just ceasing to exist, leaving behind holes in reality that hurt to look at and made nearby planets forget they were supposed to have gravity. They consume possibility itself, the builders explained. They take what is and force it back into what was. They are the universe's way of preventing growth, change, evolution. Jake watched the recordings of the attacked systems. Perfect crystalline cities reduced to mathematical equations, Voron battle fleets analyzed out of existence, ancient civilizations with millions of years of culture simply deleted. Then came the message from Earth that changed everything. Jake, this is Colonel Martinez. New Geneva Command. The transmission was crackling with dimensional static, the words bleeding together like watercolors in rain. We've got a situation here that our best people can't figure out. It started in Detroit, your old neighborhood. People are getting sick with something that doesn't show up on any medical scanner we've got. Jake's blood ran cold. Detroit, where he'd learned to fix impossible things in the ruins of the old auto plants, where Emma still lived, teaching kids how to rebuild the world one salvaged part at a time. They're not dying exactly, Martinez continued. They're just fading, becoming less real. The whole city block where you grew up is starting to look like a badly tuned holovid. Sometimes the buildings forget they're supposed to be solid. Sometimes the people forget they're supposed to exist. Jake started to plot a course for Earth, but the builders stopped him with a flood of urgent communication that tasted like ozone and desperation. Not yet. If you go now, you'll only make it worse. The reality eaters are already there, feeding on the dimensional instability your old experiments created. They're using your home as an anchor point to break through into normal space. Then what am I supposed to do? Let my sister fade away while I play with alien technology? Build, create. Make something so impossibly chaotic that it breaks their understanding of reality. But first, you need to understand what you're really fighting. Turns out, impossible is just another word for hasn't met the right human yet. What the builders showed Jake next broke his mind. Would have broken it if his mind hadn't been Detroit tough and held together with philosophical duct tape. The reality eaters weren't evil in any way humans could understand. They were immune systems, antibodies. The universe's way of maintaining stability by destroying anything that challenged the fundamental laws of physics. We've been painting a target on humanity's back since the day we figured out how to make fire burn. Underwater, Jake realized. Exactly. Every time someone like you builds something that shouldn't work, it creates dimensional stress. Small violations are usually ignored, but the kind of impossible engineering that humans specialize in, that rings alarm bells across multiple realities. The builders showed him the cosmic background radiation, and Jake saw the truth hidden in the static. Every human innovation, every jury-rigged solution, every time someone had looked at a broken machine and said, I can fix that, without reading the manual. All of it had been sending signals across dimensional space, signals that said, the quarantine isn't working, the chaos is spreading. Send help. And now they're coming to sterilize the infection, the builders continued. But here's what they don't understand. Chaos isn't a disease, it's evolution. It's growth. It's the only way the universe can become more than it is. The builders had learned this too late. Each species had fought the reality eaters alone, creating magnificent last stands before being consumed and catalogued and filed away under problem solved. but they'd managed to preserve their knowledge, their techniques, their refusal to accept limitations. You're saying humanity needs to do more than just survive this. We need to win. Not just win, transform. Become something the reality eaters can't digest because we're too chaotic, too impossible, too beautifully broken for their ordered minds to process. Jake thought about Detroit, about his sister teaching kids to build hope out of scrap metal, about every human engineer who'd ever looked at a broken machine and said, "I can fix that," without bothering to check if it was supposed to be fixable, about the coffee shop owner who'd kept his business running during the siege by brewing coffee with water that didn't exist, about the mechanic who'd fixed a starship engine by singing to it in 3-part harmony, about Emma's students learning to solve problems that didn't have solutions by pretending they did. Show me how. The blueprint that flooded his mind was less a plan than a philosophy made manifest. Not one impossible machine, but a network of them. Every piece of human technology, every jury-rigged solution, every duct-taped miracle humanity had ever created, all connected in a galaxy-spanning web of beautiful dysfunction. It would require Jake to sacrifice his humanity, not lose it, but expand it beyond biological limitations. Become a bridge between human chaos and builder wisdom, a living nexus for the most impossible engineering project in galactic history. Will I still be me? You'll be more you than you've ever been. But you'll also be us, and we'll be you, and together we'll be something new. Something that laughs at entropy and builds cathedrals out of cosmic jokes. Jake thought about Emma, about the kids she taught, about every human who'd ever refused to accept that something couldn't be done. Let's break the universe. The process began with Jake's ship. Using builder techniques combined with human obstinacy, he convinced necessity to exist in several states simultaneously. Solid and energy, matter and thought, broken and functional, all at the same time. The ship became a living contradiction, held together by the human belief that if something worked, it didn't matter why. "Okay, sweetheart," Jake said to his ship as it began to exist in colors that didn't have names. "Time to find out if we're as crazy as everyone thinks." The ship hummed back in harmonics that translated to, "Let's find out together." Then came the painful part. Jake had to merge his consciousness with the quantum network the builders had created, spreading his awareness across the nebula, and eventually, the galaxy. But unlike the builders, who had died in the process, Jake planned to stay stubbornly, impossibly alive. As his consciousness expanded, Jake felt the approach of the reality eaters more clearly. They were vast, patient, and certain of their purpose. They saw the dimensional stress humanity created and reacted with the cold efficiency of white blood cells attacking an infection. But they'd never encountered an infection that talked back. "Hello there." Jake broadcast through quantum space as his awareness touched the edge of their reality. "I'm Jake Morrison, professional maker of things that shouldn't work. And you folks are about to learn why humans don't read instruction manuals." The response was immediate and overwhelming. A wave of order crashing down on Jake's chaotic consciousness. For a moment, he felt his sense of self dissolving, his beautiful dysfunction being analyzed and categorized and marked for deletion. Then he remembered Emma's laugh, the sound she made when one of her students built something impossible. Pure joy at the act of creation, at the moment when chaos became art. Jake held onto that laugh and used it as a weapon. The reality eaters recoiled in confusion. They'd encountered chaos before, but never chaos that was happy about being chaotic. Never disorder that celebrated itself, that took pride in its impossibility, that laughed at entropy and asked for seconds. "What are you?" they asked, their ordered thoughts tinged with something that might have been curiosity. "I'm human," Jake replied, his consciousness now spanning multiple star systems and running on coffee and pure spite. "We're the species that fixes things by hitting them with bigger hammers. We're the people who look at the laws of physics and say, that's more of a guideline. Really. We're the ones who turn junk into miracles because we're too stupid to know it's impossible." And today, Jake continued, his awareness now touching every human settlement in the galaxy, "you're going to learn why the universe needs us." As he spoke, Jake was building, not just one machine, but millions of them. In every human settlement, every colony, every ship, quantum relays activated. The network didn't follow any sensible design. It was held together with determination and hope, powered by engines that argued with themselves about efficiency, while secretly cooperating, guided by navigation systems that got lost in their own programming but somehow always arrived exactly where they needed to be. It was the most beautiful thing the reality eaters had ever encountered, and they couldn't digest it. The universe had rules. Jake had a galaxy full of humans who thought rules were suggestions. It wasn't going to be a fair fight. The attack began at the edge of civilized space, where the crystalline collective's geometric cities had achieved mathematical beauty that lasted for millions of years. The reality eaters swept through those ordered structures like acid through crystal, dissolving perfection back into component chaos. Jake felt the collective's death scream through his expanded consciousness. Billions of beings whose entire existence was based on harmonic resonance, cut off in mid-song. It was horrifying and beautiful and wrong in ways that made Jake's human soul ache. "Now you're pissing me off," he told the reality eaters. But as the cities died, something unexpected happened. The human modifications Jake had installed in collective technology, chaotic little improvements that didn't belong in the mathematical perfection, those modifications survived. They were too paradoxical to be analyzed and destroyed. The Voron Empire fell next, their logical battle strategies meaningless against enemies that didn't follow any rules. Jake watched through his quantum sensors as the eternal logic, the ship he'd repaired with duct tape and attitude, made its final stand. The Voron crew fought with honor and discipline and mathematical precision. They lasted exactly 47 seconds, but again, the human modifications survived. The impossible repairs that had given the ship unprecedented power continued to function even as the ship itself was being erased from reality. That's it, Jake realized. That's how we win. Emergency signals poured in from across the galaxy. The council species who had exiled humanity now begged for help. They offered Jake anything: leadership positions, entire star systems, fleets of ships, the secret histories of their civilizations, their firstborn children, their gods' personal phone numbers. "Thanks, but I've got work to do," Jake transmitted back, his consciousness now harmonizing with quantum ghosts and human stubbornness in equal measure. Turns out the universe needs more impossible things, not fewer. The reality eaters pressed their attack, consuming the ordered structure of space itself. Star systems vanished, leaving behind holes in reality that would never heal. The fabric of normal space-time began to unravel as the entities fed on the underlying mathematical constants that held everything together. And through it all, Jake's network of beautiful dysfunction grew stronger. Each impossible human innovation that survived the reality eater's assault became a node in Jake's growing network. Coffee shops that served beverages in impossible flavors, repair shops that fixed things by making them more broken in exactly the right way. Schools where children learned to solve problems that didn't have solutions by pretending they did. The reality eaters had expected to find chaos. Instead, they found chaos with a sense of humor. And humor, it turned out, was indigestible. The final battle didn't happen in space. It happened in the spaces between spaces, in the quantum foam that existed beneath reality's surface, where the fundamental forces of the universe kept their holiday homes. Jake's consciousness, now spanning the galaxy and supported by millions of impossibly functioning human machines, faced the reality eaters in their own domain. Here, in the realm of pure concept and mathematical abstraction, the true nature of the conflict became clear. The reality eaters weren't trying to destroy chaos. They were trying to prevent the universe from evolving. They were the cosmic equivalent of a parent saying, "Because I said so," to a child asking, "Why can't I fly?" But Jake had spent his entire life refusing to accept "because I said so" as an answer. "You're not protecting the universe," he told them. His thoughts now harmonizing with the quantum ghosts of a million dead builders. "You're keeping it in a cage. You're preventing it from becoming something amazing. Order must be maintained," they responded, their thoughts tasting like mathematics and fear. chaos leads to collapse. We have seen civilizations destroy themselves with uncontrolled innovation. Yeah, but you've also seen civilizations destroy themselves with too much control, Jake replied. The crystalline collective was so ordered they couldn't adapt when you showed up. The Vorons were so logical they couldn't think outside their own programming. Jake showed them Detroit. Not the modern city, but the one from his childhood. Broken, abandoned, seemingly hopeless. Buildings that had given up on being buildings. Infrastructure that ran on prayer and good intentions. People who had every reason to despair. Then he showed them what those people had built from the ruins. Gardens growing in empty lots. Communities formed around shared tools and mutual aid. Children learning to fix impossible things because no one had told them they were impossible. Art made from broken glass. Hope constructed from scrap metal. Beauty assembled from the pieces everyone else had thrown away. This is what chaos looks like when it's guided by hope instead of fear, Jake explained. This is what the universe could become if you stopped trying to keep it the same forever. The reality eaters paused in their assault, their vast intelligences processing this new perspective. For the first time in cosmic history, they encountered chaos that wasn't destructive. It was creative. Chaos that built instead of destroyed. Chaos that laughed instead of screamed. Chaos that looked at the impossible and said, "Hold my coffee." "Show us," they said. What Jake built next wasn't a weapon or a shield. It was a translation device. Using the combined knowledge of every builder species, powered by humanity's stubborn refusal to accept limitations, Jake created a network that could convert chaos into order and order into chaos. Not to destroy either one, but to let them communicate. The reality eaters experienced wonder for the first time as Jake showed them the beauty of controlled chaos. They saw how human engineering took broken pieces and made them into something better than the original. They witnessed the joy of creation, the satisfaction of solving impossible problems, the deep contentment that came from making something work that everyone said couldn't work. In return, the reality eaters showed Jake the patterns that held the universe together. Not the rigid structures he'd expected, but flowing, adaptive systems that could grow and change while maintaining their essential nature. Order that was alive, flexible, capable of learning new songs. "We have been incorrect," they admitted, their thoughts now tinged with something that might have been embarrassment. "We believed stability required stagnation, but your species proves that chaos and order can coexist, each making the other stronger." "Want to help us fix the galaxy?" Jake asked. The rebuilding began immediately. Instead of restoring the consumed civilizations exactly as they had been, Jake and the reality eaters, who had started calling themselves possibility gardeners, worked together to create something new. The crystalline collective cities were rebuilt with intentional flaws that made them more beautiful and more adaptable. The Voron Empire's fleets were redesigned with human-style backup plans that made no logical sense but somehow always worked when needed. But the real miracle was Earth. Jake's consciousness touched down. In Detroit, where Emma was teaching a class of young engineers in a workshop that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. The dimensional instability that had been threatening the city was still there, but now it was controlled, channeled into a network of impossible machines that turned abandoned factories into interdimensional workshops. "Jake?" Emma said, looking up at a display screen where her brother's face appeared, somehow older and younger and more himself than before. "Is that really you?" "It's me, Em. Just more me than before." Jake's smile was visible across 17 dimensions simultaneously. "How would you like to help redesign the universe?" "I've got some ideas, but I'm going to need someone who reads instruction manuals," Emma laughed. That same joyful sound that had become Jake's weapon against entropy itself. "Only if you promise not to blow anything up, Em?" Jake said, his consciousness now encompassing stars and possibilities and the dreams of impossible civilizations. "I'm going to build things so amazing that blowing up will be the least of our worries." Through the workshop windows, students from a dozen species worked together on projects that would have been considered madness just a few years ago. A Voron learning to build with intuition instead of logic. A crystalline entity discovering the joy of intentional asymmetry. A possibility gardener teaching youngsters how to bend space-time without breaking it. Jake maintained his workshop in the Scrapyard Nebula, his consciousness flickering between human form and pure quantum possibility. He was still recognizably himself. Still the guy who'd grown up fixing cars in Detroit, still the engineer who believed every problem had a solution if you just thought sideways enough. But now he carried the dreams of 1,000,000 impossible civilizations, and his toolbox contained the fundamental forces of reality itself. The galaxy didn't need humanity to be civilized, it needed humanity to be human, and in the beautiful chaos of the rebuilt universe, that was exactly what they were.